Welcome to a venue which has seen some landmark days in the great history of Formula One. And the Grand Prix is go! Oh, look at that!
Front wing damage.
Oh, he made contact! The wheels come off for Mercedes.
Spain for me is the best country in the world.
It's always your home Grand Prix where you want to deliver something extra.
Fernando Alonso, that was a late move. We have seen so much Formula One history through the years at this venue.
Good reset. There is no other circuit on the Formula One calendar that the drivers know better. Whether in real life or from simulations, this is F1's proving ground. We are back at the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya, but a lot later in the season than we are used to. Welcome, folks, to your weekend warm-up from here in the pit lane in Spain with me, Will Buxton, with her, Ruth Buscombe. Ruth, it's great to be back here. We got some Checo fans, but it's great to be back in Spain.
Just a few, eh? Yeah, it feels like coming home. Honestly, we were saying this morning, it's the only constant in my entire life. You change countries, you change teams, but we come back here every year.
And you started your career off as a sim engineer, so do you have nightmares about this place for the sheer number of laps that you've gone through mentally over the years?
Yeah, I could probably draw the tarmac from memory, as could probably pretty much most of the engineers, mechanics and drivers in this pit lane.
It is an astonishing place to keep coming back to. Of course, Spain has two drivers in the field, both gunning for victory this weekend, Carlos Sainz and Fernando Alonso. The future of Formula One in Spain is bright. We are moving to Madrid in 2026, and with that in mind, the 2026 technical regulations were brought out just a few days ago. A really promising start, I think, to look towards the future, how they will develop over time as the teams all have their say and they develop into what 2026 will be incredibly positive. But the here and the now, Ruth, is this weekend's Grand Prix. We're here more than a month later than we normally are. It's bucketed down with rain today, but it should be dry tomorrow, dry for Saturday, but a chance, I don't know, small or medium or large chance of rain on race day itself.
Well, here comes the statistics. So climatologically, the chance of rain, at this time of year, it's pretty low on any given day. But for Sunday, we do have a 60% chance of raining in the morning. That drops to a 40% chance of rain during the race. But I will say, I've come here so many years, and it has predicted rain during the race. And I've never had a wet race. And I do believe the last time we had a proper wet race here was 1996, when a young Michael Schumacher won his first race for Ferrari. So we'll have to see if, once again, the rain in Spain falls mainly in the morning before the race and not actually during the race itself.
But if it does, and I don't know if folks at home can see this, probably not so much on the jacket, but actually Olivier's over there. Olivier, if you spin round and show us the Oracle Red Bull Racing down there, it's not just water that falls. Peek down here, mate, down there, right there. Look at this. It's not just water. That's sand from the Sahara Desert that's somehow up in the clouds. I'm not much of a geography student, and then is depositing that down here as well. So it's not just a wet track or a track that will take away all of the rubber that's been laid down with the rain that falls. You've got all of this sand that is falling down on the track as well. If that hits Sunday morning, that changes everything for everyone.
You sound like a strategist. Now, yeah, exactly. So that sand will drive up degradation, and we've had years that pushed it from a one-stop to a two-stop, not because it's been wet on the day, but as you say, because it's been wet overnight or after qualifying, where there isn't particularly much running after that point.
Now, I was sat happily at home over the Canadian Grand Prix weekend. You were there, getting rained on. It was a very wet weekend. It was a very wet race, and as you were there, I think it's only fair that you should have the honor of the 60-second recap.
Oh, okay. Go on then.
Yeah? All right. We'll do. Go for it.
Right, having set identical lap times in qualifying, George and Max took the front row. Only Haas gambled on those full wets and over the inters, which saw both drivers overtake through the field. K-Mag getting as high as fourth before that slow pit stop dropped him back down through the field. When the track was drying by lap 16, the McLarens were clearly the quickest, with Lando overtaking Max and then George for the lead. He continued to open up until Logan's spin into the barriers brought out the safety car on lap 25. Max, George and Oscar boxed on that first lap. Lando got caught by the safety car, catching him 10 seconds and putting in P4. Albon put on a show with a double overtake of Daniel and Esteban. McLaren tried to use their pace to overcut again, didn't quite manage it, racing out of the box. Oscar on older tyres gets overtaken. Carlos then is spinning, gets clipped by Albon, sending him into the barriers. George, Oscar and Lewis battled it out for P3. Yuki's great race was undone with 65 spin. And Russell on mediums past Lewis on hards for P3. Lando's P2 helped McLaren score 88 points in the last 3 races, but the winner for the 60th time in Formula One was none other than Max Verstappen, joined on the podium there, throwing champagne all over him by strategist Steve. A phenomenal race that was ultimately won, not by the fastest car, but by a very, very good drive and a very, very good pit wall of decisions throughout that really phenomenal race for everybody that didn't get rained on.
Never mind, look out Lawrence Barretto, look out Alex Jakes. That was phenomenal, Ruth. Very, very impressive. Really enjoyable race. I absolutely loved watching that. And as you say, it wasn't the fastest car that won that Grand Prix. How much of Max Verstappen's victory was down to them calling the strategy right, getting the conditions right and making the most of those opportunities that were presented to them?
Yeah, it was a real team win, wasn't it? It wasn't just the car itself that, as we saw, was fairly fast in those wet conditions when they could use when they didn't have to use those curbs, but when it was drying out, it wasn't the fastest car on track. In fact, it wasn't even the second fastest car on track. Both the Mercs and that McLaren were clearly faster in both drying and dry conditions. But what ultimately made the decisions, the difference was the decisions from the pit wall, the pit stops by the lovely boys in the background here, and the phenomenal driving. And we cannot forget just quite how good Max Verstappen is. That safety car restart alone, 0.8 seconds, I believe, by turn 2 in terms of the final one. It was a race that was well and truly won, and what a race it was, and hopefully we get some more of the same.
60 wins since that first one here back in 2016. Lewis Hamilton in the same amount of time, also 60 Grand Prix victories in that intervening period. It is the 1,111th Formula One Grand Prix this weekend, if we include the 10 Indy 500s between 1950 and 1960. Sergio Perez had a bit of a harder weekend than his teammate Max Verstappen. Out in Q1, crashed out of the race, brought the car back to the pits. Team told him to do that. They were handed a fine. Checo was handed a grid penalty. So he will be starting from further back than he should be, no matter what happens this weekend. How difficult does a driver who is showing such, I don't want to say poor form, because it's sporadically good and then sporadically bad. It's consistently inconsistent. How difficult does that make life for a team strategist when you get in and you know you've got Max, everything's working with the car, that's reliable, he's there. But when you've got to try to make up those positions during the Grand Prix, how much of a headache is that?
Well, it's interesting you say that as a team strategist, because remember, when you're head of strategy of both cars. And we've had the situation before, especially last year, where Max could win it all on his own. He didn't need the help of that other car, whether that's strategically or just physically being the car in second. You can't be undercut by your own teammate. Whereas now, with both, well, effectively 4 cars last race in contention for the win. Let's see what the situation is this week. But if the championship is getting closer, having 2 people out there, having your wingman, whether that is somebody doing a reverse strategy, covering an opposite safety car window, it makes a huge difference if you're out there kind of racing with 2 cars rather than racing with 1.
Now the talk today throughout the paddock has been return to Barcelona, track we know so well, a track that Red Bull traditionally goes well on. Will this be a return to the Red Bull dominance? We talked so much over recent races about having to ride the curbs, the Red Bull not really enjoying riding the curbs. Is it as simple as that, coming back to a kind of a traditional flow-in, sort of bit of an easier circuit on the car? Certainly. Do you expect to see Red Bull back to where traditionally we'd expect them to be?
Well, the exact quantitative answer to that one is a difficult one, but qualitatively, yes. The last 4 polls have been done by 0.15, 0.09, 0.14, and then 0, only for the second time in F1 history. But all 4 of those tracks were what we would call technical circuits. By that, we mean they've got lots of real tight corners, low speed, and a lot of curbs. This track is completely different. This is what we call a traditional circuit. It's got a full range of speed corners, a lot of those high-speed corners where in the first races of the season, that RB20 was in its comfort zone, and a lot fewer curb riding. That means you have to worry about it. So the form book on paper is going to swing back to Red Bull. But the exciting thing about Barcelona is since we've been to kind of these traditional circuits, a lot has changed on the car. So what we don't know is if anyone else has joined them.
And we will get to that because one team in particular we've got to take a look at is Mercedes. Difficult start to the year. Then they brought that front wing upgrade, first for George, then for Lewis. George, pole position last time out. Brilliant job from him. Struggled in the race, admitted he made too many mistakes. Lewis Hamilton said it was one of the worst Grand Prix he's ever raced in his entire time in Formula One. How much of this weekend is going to be the litmus test for that Mercedes and those upgrades on it?
I think everything. You know, that one upgrade, certainly on the track characteristics we have in Montreal, those low-speed corners, those curb ridings, it was a great... we called it a Hemsworth wing. You missed out on all the Hemsworth
I've missed
chat.
out on the Hemsworth chat.
But, you know, it really made such a huge difference because, as we said, you know, it's not just a front wing. A front wing might enable you to run your car in a certain setup condition that you weren't able to before, to extract performance that was always there but you couldn't unlock. Now, going into the race, we said, sure, we've seen it in dry, but if it rains, is it any good in the wet? Answer, yes. Today and this weekend, the question is, it was great in low-speed corners, but are the gains that you see in low-speed corners transferable over to mid-speed and high-speed? And that is something that is a completely different area that you're developing on. And they probably have an idea from the simulator. We don't know.
Indeed we don't. One thing we do know, change to the regulations over the past few days from the FIA in terms of the age at which a driver can gain a super license. Before it was 18 and you had to have 40 super license points, but it's now changed and you can be 17 if you have shown significant promise and enough that would merit you being allowed a super license early. Now, the reason we're talking about that is because ever since Lewis Hamilton said that he was off to Ferrari for 2025, the talk has been, and I've been convinced from day one, that Andrea Kimi Antonelli will be in that Mercedes alongside George Russell in 2025. Then around the Miami Grand Prix, we heard that a request had been put into the FIA to allow Antonelli in before his 18th birthday into Formula One. Now, that is either for a race or even for a FP1 session. And of course, all the teams have to run a young driver in an FP1 session twice before the end of the year. I can't imagine that the requirement to change the rule would come in unless Mercedes or, by proxy, Williams are considering running Kimi Antonelli in at least a free practice session before he turns 18. Otherwise, what's the point?
Well, yeah, this rule has been there for a long time. So back in the day, back in 2015, a young chap, 17 years, 166 days. You might have heard of him, Max Verstappen. He joined Formula One, did his first Grand Prix, and as a result of that, they decided that actually it's an adults' playground, and they changed the rule that meant that you had to be 18 to get the license, basically.
And you had to get the points.
Exactly. Now, they've changed this rule. Actually, if you want to know the number, it's the addendum to the rules. So it's not actually the F1 rules, it's the kind of the appendix to a series of sporting regulations that govern a lot of other sports.
The prologue.
The prologue, yeah. So Article 13.1.3.A, you missed all of these in Canada, so you're getting your fair share this week.
Prologue, epilogue.
Has been changed.
I've got it wrong.
So yeah, as you say, it's a rule that's been there for 8 years, 9 years even, and now it's been changed, and things don't tend to change without a reason.
Yeah, no, it's definitely there for a reason. The prospect now of seeing Kimi Antonelli in a Williams or in a Mercedes before he turns 18 at the Italian Grand Prix getting ever higher, but I am convinced whatever happens, he will be in one of those cars in 2025. Right, McLaren. We've spoken about the fact that Max Verstappen was able to win the Canadian Grand Prix without the fastest car in the field. Arguably, that was McLaren. Arguably, Lando Norris should have won the race. Two controversial decisions, non-decisions, under safety car ultimately robbed him of that win. But does he rue the mistakes made in Canada when he looks back 2 weeks later? Lando, Canada. Looking back on it, was that a missed opportunity, a lost opportunity for the win?
Potentially. There isn't a yes-no answer. We would have had a better chance of winning, but at the same time, I think Mercedes and George were probably the strongest team driver combination last weekend. So as much as I say that, if he just made less mistakes like we did, he also probably should have won the race. So it's impossible to say yes or no, but we would have had a better chance. We would have been ahead of Max. But that's it. That's life. We've understood it, we've reviewed it, and we've tried to improve, and we'll make sure we do a better job this time out.
A lot of the talk after the race was about the decision or non-decision to come in and pit, crucially at two main areas in the race. How much have you and the team got to talk about that balance between reacting and being proactive?
It was really just one. We gained on the second one. I don't know why. A lot of people said we made the wrong decision in the second pit stop. It was completely the right decision. I gained on the guys around me. So, no, we made one very good one. Obviously, one not so good one. But it's small changes, really. It's not like we have to suddenly go back and review everything and go, why have we done this? Why have we done that?
Triple header, 3 medium to high speed, pretty much high speed circuits coming up. How well do you think it'll suit the car?
Good question. I mean, it's definitely been a strength of ours in the past. I think others have improved quite a bit in these high speed circuits. Such as Ferrari. I mean, Red Bull have always been good, and now we see Mercedes looking closer to the fight. So maybe a little less confident, but we don't know yet. You know, we've changed quite a few things on the car over the last few weeks, and we've not been to necessarily high-speed circuits for a while. So we're kind of waiting to see what we do over the next day of practice and see if we can get the car performing like it has done in the past in high-speed circuits. And then I'll be confident that we can. We should be able to fight. You know, like the whole season we've been strong. At every race, we've not had a bad weekend yet, so we're showing consistency, and that's also a good thing for us.
Great weekends, every weekend so far in 2024 for McLaren, the only team to have completed every lap this season, the only team to have scored points with both drivers in every single Grand Prix this season. I believe that's the right statistic. You'll
Nearly.
Tell me if where did I get it?
I believe it's just Lando left. He's the last man standing.
Is he the only one? Is he the only one? There we go.
But you're right, McLaren scored the most points.
The big question, the really big question, and we put it to Lando. They've cured the low-speed ills of this car, but has that affected the high-speed power, the high-speed performance that we've seen this car exhibit traditionally? And we're only going to get the answer to that this weekend. How confident are you? What are you hearing in the paddock about this car, this team, their chances this weekend?
Well, I mean, I think everybody's kind of going into Spain. It's almost like a mini reset, you know? It's almost like, you know, obviously it's one big Formula One season, but for us within teams, Spain really represents the kind of the start of the summer of our racing. And so you kind of have all your theories, you have all your numbers, but you also don't know what other people may have in the pocket. And again, you know, real life and simulations are often slightly different, especially when it comes to high-speed modelling, because that involves so much to do with driver confidence, which is just not really possible to replicate on a simulator in quite the same way that you have when you're actually out on a racetrack. So I think there's every reason to be excited if you were dressed in papaya this weekend, and I think you're going to have to watch to find out, to be honest, because I don't think even they know.
No, that's absolutely it. How much more of these guys got to be on their game when it comes to strategy? When we look at what happened in Canada, when we look towards this weekend, there's some talk about, you know, will it be a 2-stop? Might it even be a 3-stop? Have these guys got to be, and I put the question to Lando, do they need to be more proactive with how they're approaching their race strategies?
Well, I mean, we've talked about the drivers. We could talk about the engineers. You've got to remember that Red Bull pit wall has 3 strategists that are senior personnel that have been in Formula One for probably a total of about 70 years.
Yeah.
So that is a really experienced pit wall that has been winning championships and races for years. And all of us, you know, when you suddenly have a car that's suddenly up at the sharp end, it's an adjustment period for everybody, whether that's the mechanics, the engineers, the drivers. And as you say, one of the great things about a Barcelona race strategy is just because of the nature of the layout, it's often a crossover. So we had a proper 2-stop last year, but for the previous few years, it was a 2/3 in 2022. And then in 2021, of course, it was that 1/2 strategy where the Mercedes came out on top of the Red Bull pit wall. So it can all change.
I remember 2013, Ruth.
Oh, I remember 2013 very fondly. A lesser spotted Barcelona 4-stop.
That was your doing.
Well, I'm not really sure. I was a very, very junior strategist. It was some of the first simulations I ever ran. I'm definitely not taking this. They took ages to run because they were a 4-stopper. But we did do a lovely 4-stop strategy with, I don't want to say king of Spain because now we have two. But at the time, our king of Spain, Fernando Alonso, to win the race.
It was electrifying.
Still the most recent Spanish race winner. But yeah, I did just run the simulations. I'm not going to take credit.
Fernando Alonso earlier today saying there may be two Spanish drivers in the Spanish Grand Prix, but only one of them has a shot at victory. That, he believes, is Carlos Sainz. Let's take a look at your championship order as we come into the Spanish Grand Prix, because Max Verstappen, of course, remains your championship leader, but it is awfully tight. Charles Leclerc on 138, then Lando Norris just 7 points behind him. Then it's Sainz and Perez. They're split by just the 1 point. Piastri, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton getting down there into 8th, 9th, 10th. Alonso and Tsunoda having an absolutely belting season. We will tell you more about RB a little bit later because they are hoping for a strong weekend. Then it's Stroll and Ricciardo. Behrman still up there in 13th despite having just the one Grand Prix. And he's ahead of Hülkenberg, Gasly, Albon and Ocon. Magnussen with the final point. No points yet for the two Saubers or the Williams of Logan Sargent. Ruth, we have to talk about Ferrari. Home hero, home crowd expects. But it was a tough weekend for them last time out in Canada. A double DNF. Fred Vasseur saying, listen, 0 to 0 is just the new norm in Formula One. But that was some fall from grace.
Well, I mean, no points is never good, especially off the back of a race win. And, that engine issue really set that whole race off. And I think it was 80 horsepower for 15 laps, and they kind of kept that car going in case there was a red flag so they could reset the car, which is fancy F1 talk for turn it off and turn it back on again.
Control Alt Delete.
Yeah, Control Alt Delete. And then, of course, there was the mistake that Carlos did, a very sportsmanly own up to in terms of that also took out Albon. So, reset, refresh. We've got new car parts. We've turned it on. We've turned it back off again. If you're a Ferrari fan, we're ready to go again.
Charles would not admit what the engine problem was when I asked him today, but he did say it has been sorted. So we'll just take that as a net gain, as a positive. Carlos, interestingly, in the press conference today, says he now has to make his mind up about where he's heading next year because it is taking up too much mental space and he needs to focus on his driving. So will it be Audi? Will it be Williams? I think it's going to be Williams, isn't it?
I guess we'll just have to find out.
Obviously, crashed into what could be his new teammate last time out in Canada.
Well, it was a tap, and he did apologise.
It was a tap. It was a little kiss. It was a little
he did apologise after the race,
preemptive
and I think
kiss.
the two of them are fine. So, these things do happen, and, that was, just unfortunate for Albon. Wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah. Carlos, very much hoping that Ferrari will be back in the mix this weekend, as I think will be the 200,000 people cracking into this circuit over the course of these 3 days. The big question with all of this, isn't it, is that if Red Bull aren't a million miles ahead, it kind of confirms that we've got a major season on our hands.
Yeah, I think that's the excitement in the paddock, as everybody's kind of waiting to see if when we get back to these more traditional circuits, we're going to see the run of, let's say, kind of competitive for multiple team form going through.
Right, on to Aston Martin, because we talk about Carlos, obviously the home hero. Fernando Alonso, also the home hero, who you ran, and as you have stated, the last home winner here at the Spanish Grand Prix. Loves this track, but Aston Martin not expecting a great weekend. One of a few teams who haven't brought any upgrades here this weekend. McLaren haven't either. And on this circuit, where we know it's that proving ground that you've spoken of, Frank, personally, I'm surprised that more teams haven't brought major upgrade packages here, particularly because Aston Martin know that high-speed strength is lacking, and that's what the next 3 circuits are all about. As we roll into this triple header, how important does this race sort of represent as an outlier?
I mean, the thing is that with this kind of, we're in this cost cap era, which means that, teams only have a limited amount of money to spend, and all teams can decide how they want to spend that. If they want to spend it all, it's like your pocket money. If you spend it all at the beginning of the year, you won't have any later. Yeah. So teams will have decided ahead of time when they're going to put their upgrade packages in. And just with Barcelona being a little bit later, we've seen already from a lot of teams, not all, big upgrade packages, which we would normally only see in Barcelona in time gone by. So I think that's slightly part of it. And I think it's also just to do with, when you actually find something good enough worth manufacturing. Yeah. Because you can't long gone are the days when you can just, we used to call it fit and forget. You know, you have a little something, you make it, you put it on, you forget about it. You can't really do that anymore. You have to really be smart about you do it. And I quite like that. I like the idea that it's a real show and a real game in terms of the engineering to try and decide when you're going to pop the upgrade on.
This used to be round 4, round 5, so you could do that. This was
And
where
in
the
May.
first, yeah, and the first major upgrades would come here. Now we're almost in July. It's wild. Absolutely wild. Right. Things tickety-boo at Aston Martin between the drivers. Lance Stroll confirming to me today that he will announce what he's doing next year soon. I think we know what that will be. No shocks. Down at Alpine, however, a very different scenario. Esteban Ocon not happy either with Pierre Gasly or the team after Canada, was asked to give up the place to Gasly to allow him to go and fight. Was told they would reverse positions at the end of the race. They did not do that. Esteban Ocon, who it's already been announced will leave Alpine at the end of the year, really nonplussed with what went down there. I spoke to both drivers this afternoon. Knowing, of course, that you're leaving the team at the end of the year, how confident are you that parity, equality within the team will be given to you for the remainder of this season? Because there's a long way to go.
Yeah, no, for sure. But it's been discussed with the team. That will be something that will be, dealt with, equally between the drivers. And, I've been reassured that this was going to be the case. And normally we're starting from this weekend.
And for your future, obviously there's some options left on the table here in Formula One. I know you were at Le Mans last weekend. We've spoken many times in the past of your passion for that race. How's the future looking? Anything that you can tell us about yet?
Not yet. Obviously, there are discussions at the moment going on, and as long as we keep that going and I'm focusing on what I have to do on the track, I'm happy with the situation. So we will see, where that leads us.
Are you committed to Alpine after this year? Is your intention to stay here, or are you looking elsewhere?
I think, my contract situation is quite clear. My contract runs until the end of the year. There are different talks and conversations, and I'm happy where we are at the moment. Everything is evolving in the right direction, and I don't have anything to announce just now. So you guys will have to be a bit patient, but it's an ongoing process.
Non-committal from Pierre Gasly. Rumours would suggest he might be Audi-bound if Carlos Sainz ultimately decides that he's going to go to Williams. Esteban Ocon, we hear, moving ever closer to that Haas seat, because we know they want a race winner. Alpine have more than just an underperforming car to contend with, Ruth. They might have to find 2 new drivers for next year as well. It's been a difficult season for these guys with that car, and we know they're rotating the chassis between the two of them, one heavily overweight, one not so much. When we get to a circuit like this, that is the ultimate proving ground, is this a weekend for them where they will be very much focused on learning everything they can that they haven't already about the car, or is it going to be just gripping on for whatever they can?
Well, I mean, just having a look in the garage here, you can see that, we just put away the Leica camera. So they've already been, measuring that car. So that car's pretty much ready and raring to go. So to answer your question, looking into that garage, looks like they're getting ready to race. And remember, there's only 2 drivers and there's hundreds of people back at base that have been working tirelessly on that car. And they certainly are ready to get some points, if they can do it this weekend.
Alpine ahead of only Williams and Sauber in the Constructors' Championship at the moment. We spoke a little bit about Albon having a spin. They're hoping for better things this weekend. The team's starting to come on, but we know the pressure now on Logan Sargent is vast with that change to the regulations to allow a 17-year-old in. He's going to feel that heat down his neck. What's Williams got to do around here to give Albon a decent car, to give Logan just a shot at proving himself again?
Well, normally what you do when you're in a team that's, struggling to get to the points is you set micro targets. You say, okay, so our target for today is to finish, with a P12 and P13, trying to make those incremental steps. And as you say, trying to finish a race in terms of reliability, in terms of, giving a target to a driver that it's whether or not necessarily trying to beat your teammate. Of course, he's 30-0, I believe, now to Albon in qualifying, but to give him a target to say, okay, stop trying to beat him, be within 1/10 or be within 2/10 and give him an objective target, which I'm sure the lovely James Vowles, who is a strategist himself, is already doing, because he's kind of pretty much the godfather of metrics like that. So, I think in terms of, from a strategic element, he's in safe hands. And he, again, is going to reset and Reno, and he will know this track so well. Every single driver, whether they've done whatever Formula route, they know this place, and that will give automatically comfort to any driver going into this one.
Seems amazing to think that Carlos Sainz could be Williams bound next year, but with the big regulation change in 2026, the Mercedes power unit apparently already looking quite promising. Could be quite a nice move for Carlos to a Mercedes powered Williams. Let's talk Sauber if we can, because the one thing that's really linking Alpine, Williams and Sauber seems to be issues with their chassis, because Alpine, we know, were a little bit overweight. Williams, with the crash damage, their chassis a little bit overweight. Zhou Guanyu really unhappy with the chassis that he has. He's reverted back to his original chassis that he had at the start of the season this weekend after a really disappointing couple of runs.
Yeah, well, I think Joe is going to come into this weekend, and I saw, he's my friend, worked with him before, and I said to him, remember last year? And he said yes, because they did score points. It didn't look like we were going to be able to score points. He scored points. The previous year, Valtteri is going to remember the 2022 race, which actually, was one of those times where briefly, ever so briefly, a Sauber was running in P3. Can you believe it, kids? And we were racing Mercedes. So this track has good memories for the good people of Hinwil, and they will, just like the good people of Enstone, be coming here ready to go and trying to get some points on the board.
New good people at Hinwil, Stefano Sordo.
Yeah, and of course, so Stefano Sordo, an engineer who's worked at McLaren, Red Bull, and I most recently saw in Indianapolis, because he's just come off of a stretch at a team called RRL there, and now come here, and actually the weather pretty similar to the last time it was in Indianapolis with the rain delay.
Yeah, it's getting a bit warm now. It's not so damp as it was. Right. We touched very briefly on Haas, because all of the talk this season, and we spoke about him earlier, he's still up there in the top 15 in the championship. Ollie Behrman, super sub in Saudi Arabia. The talk is that he will be in one of those Haas seats in Formula One next year. We caught up with him earlier today.
So, Oliver, I was going to say a very warm welcome to Barcelona. It hasn't quite worked out that way yet. But how excited are you to get back in the car tomorrow? And what's your main goal for these upcoming FP1 sessions with Haas?
Yeah, so I have 2 FP1s in the next 3 weekends. So really looking forward to getting back in the rhythm of things with Haas. My personal goal is, of course, just to keep improving myself, keep working on what I've identified as weak points when I drive in F1. And yeah, hopefully bring some data for the team as well, because of course FP1 that's the main goal of an FP1. But yeah, these are really useful sessions for me to prepare for the future.
We last spoke in Saudi Arabia after that brilliant stand-in performance, of course. How have the last few months been for you, on and off the track, and also that challenge of balancing F1 duties and racing in Formula 2?
Yeah, sorry. It's really tough to balance, first of all, especially on a weekend like this. I'm very busy. I have a lot of mental pressure, a lot of stuff to take in, but I like the challenge. It's good preparation. These last few months since Saudi have been pretty crazy. I've been very busy with F1 testing and done some FP as well. So it's been pretty full, but I love it. I've been really enjoying it. It's been really good.
And just finally, no secret, of course, that you're pushing for a full-time seat next year. What have the team told you about your prospects for that in 2025?
I haven't had anything in particular, but I think my personal goal is, like I said, to keep working on myself, perform at my best, and I think if I do that, then hopefully in with a good shout.
Thanks, Ollie. Have a good weekend.
I think he's in with a very good shout, don't you? That little look down and trying to keep the smile off his face. I was talking to him in the paddock earlier today as he was entering the track, and we were just talking about everything. And right at the end of the conversation, I said, "So, deal? Signed it yet?" And the Netflix cameras were there, and he sort of took one look and looked up at the microphone and just went, "I'll see you later," and kind of walked off. It's done, isn't it? It's done.
Don't be mean to him. He
No,
obviously
I'm
can't
happy
say.
for him.
Oh no, he's honest, a great guy, and a phenomenal drive in Saudi, which we still remember. Which of course put him on the back foot in that GP2 championship, which we can't forget.
Yep.
Oh, GP2, how old am I? F2. Sorry about that.
Retro.
Showing my years.
F3000.
We were talking about
Let's go.
2013.
Will Valtteri Bottas be on his bike next year, Ruth, or can he find a place? It looks like Sauber, there won't be a place there. Does he end up at Haas, possibly alongside Behrman as the ultimate kind of wingman, bring him in, teach him the rope? I think Valtteri would be great for a Haas.
I mean, and Valtteri was so instrumental in getting Joe up to speed. You know, we've spoken about drivers that don't necessarily get on with their teammate. Valtteri, best teammate ever. That's a quote from Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah.
Joe said the same thing. So I think anybody that's in the same team with Valtteri, you know, should be pretty happy.
Yeah, I hope we don't lose Valtteri from Formula One next year. Right, we haven't spoken about them yet, but we must, because RB, who have been punching above their weight at so many races so far this year, have brought what is ostensibly a B-spec car this weekend. I was talking to Alan Permain earlier today. He said the only thing that hasn't changed on the car is the front wing and the beam wing. Everything else is brand new, and they were already looking good. This change could get them in the mix with the likes of Aston Martin. They're putting a lot of hope, a lot of faith in this upgrade.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Aston, as you say, is the kind of the natural next target for them. And I think, yeah, it is exciting. You know, it's quite nice not to be, you know, scared by it when these documents come out as an engineer and you're like, oh no, they've got 50 parts, we've got 2. So, you know, I think everybody is kind of looking at that team and seeing how that package works, because you say it's a complete reset. And, you know, remember, it might not work. It might work phenomenally, and the only way you're going to find out is if you watch the show.
Yeah, and put it onto the ultimate test track, place that they know so well. Cannot wait to see how that... But obviously as well, Yuki, new contract in his pocket, driving magnificently. Daniel has got to start performing consistently, because it's that, it's that inconsistency that's really hampering him and his chances of coming back next year, because Liam Lawson waiting in the wings... We keep saying it, but he is so talented. Can't imagine that he won't have if he doesn't have a place here next year, that would be a huge surprise. But places are running out.
Yeah, as you say, I mean, generally when you're a Formula One team and you have kind of 5 great drivers and 4 seats, or, you know, it's a good problem to have. Yeah. But, you know, we'll have to see. I mean, he knows this track. They know this track. This is a reset for everybody, whether you're a team, you know, a mechanic, a driver, an engineer. You know, I think you've got to wait and see.
It also means no excuses. They know this place like the back of their hand. Right, folks, here's where you can catch everything over the course of the weekend. And we kick off tomorrow, Friday, for Free Practice 1. Your coverage at 1:15 local time. Then Practice 2 coming away at 4:45. Saturday sees Practice 3 at 12:15. Qualifying. Your show starts at 3:30, bringing us through into Sunday, race day here at the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya, 2 p.m. local time for the Formula One Aramco Gran Premio de España. Right, some final thoughts, and we, as always, Ruth, will do predictions. What are you foreseeing from this weekend?
You know, I'm a strategist, so I'm not going to do any of this rubbish about top 3. I'm going to focus on the strategy, which is it's slightly warmer than last year.
Yep.
And that could make it a real quite tough 2-stop with a bit more undercutting.
I like that.
Yes, we like that. So I think tough 2-stop race, bit more undercutty than we had last year, and then the safety car, VSC, could even push us into having an extra stop.
Amazing. People are keeping a count on this, so you do have to give me a top 3.
Oh, okay, fine.
We've got 30 seconds left in the show.
Right, okay, so let's go for Max and then Lando and then Oscar.
Okay, I'm going to go for Max, Charles, Lando. Great. Okay, cool. Thank you, folks, for tuning in. We'll see you over the course of the weekend. It's going to be a big one. Will Red Bull return to their dominant ways, or will it be game on? Cannot wait for the rest of the weekend. Join us then. For now, from us, that's goodbye.
Welcome to Spain. It gives me extra adrenaline.
pit stop.